something that always bugs me in TTRPGs and really fantasy in general is how little variety there is in weaponry. Like, if I see another guy with just a sword, I'm gonna lose it. I'm gonna have to do something about it. Well, okay then. I suppose I'm gonna have to do something about it. So, let's take this episode and make a warrior with an actual historical weapon that's not just a frickin' sword. Hiya, I'm Ink, they them pronouns, and welcome to the Nook. This is an art challenge series I call Dungeon Deck, where we make strange monsters and NPCs for tabletop RPGs, including a creature card. Now, with that all out of the way, let's set out the rules for this round. First off, we're using reference cards. Draw 7, keep 4, and use those to set up the drawing. 2. Use historical weapons and armor as the backbone of both illustration and story. No swords allowed. And 3. Don't forget the fantasy. All right, now that we have the rules set, let's move on to the concept. From these reference cards, I'll choose the quills, bat ears, eye hands, and a scythe. With the other rules, we can sort out that this is an adventurer NPC. Rather than some beast or monster, we have to use equipment after all. As for that equipment, I want to have a twist on the classic spear and shield loadout. Though, if you've actually tried using that kind of polearm, you'll know just how hard it is to make use of a polearm just purely one-handed. Outside of formation battles, of course. So, instead of a shield, let's make a large gauntlet. Essentially a buckler, but there's an open hand for grabbing. So as for the weapon, we'll have the scythe. But you'll notice that I'm not doing a typical fantasy scythe. This is because they're absolute garbage. They're crap designs and I hate seeing them everywhere. A real scythe, like this, is basically a medieval lawnmower. The blade and pole are angled all wrong for combat, and bending the sharp end of the blade to point toward yourself is just begging someone to ram that into your own throat. Like, how silly can you get? Then, worst of all, there's a better version out there. The war scythe. Turns out that the farmers who actually did this kind of thing and got drafted into war knew what they were doing. Oh my goodness, people figured things out. Look, they just straightened out those blades and essentially make glaives, sometimes with spikes on the end. Like, it's perfect. So we are going to use that better version of the scythe, the actual historical war scythe, not the crappy version that you see in anime all the time. Okay, rant over. Let's say that this warrior is a beast folk based on the bat ears. So we'll specifically go for a bat person. And then finally, the last card, the hand eyes. I'm not gonna put eyeballs on the ends of a person's hands. For this one, it's just too silly. So instead, I have another idea. What if we bring the hands to the eyes? This could actually be a mask. Yeah, let's go for that. All right, as we wrap up the physical sketch and concept, let's move on to the digital refinement and lore. So, we have a decent starting point with lore, but where can we go with this? With this design, we already have a bit of a conflict. This person is wielding like a war scythe, which implies that he was a farmer. But there's that huge flashy gauntlet, and on top of that, we have that strange hand mask. Like, what the heck could this all mean? Who in fantasy had such a hodgepodge of equipment, both high-end and low-end? Well, what about a classic adventurer? This guy could be an adventurer who's gone into multiple different dungeons that had different themes and types of magic items. But that's not enough. Just saying adventurer and hand-waving things off isn't a satisfying conclusion, right? So let's add one more wrinkle. This person hasn't traveled more than a day's walk from his home before he got all of these items. That means that within a circle of around 25 miles radius, the grotesque hand mask, giant intricately forged spiked gauntlet, and war scythe all came into this person's possession. So let's make a little story on how our adventurer came into these items. So let's start out with the scythe. Easy to say that there's some kind of farm around, as well as a blacksmith who can convert it into a war scythe. And maybe our adventurer was the farmer. Actually, let's say that he farmed fruit trees to go with fruit bat origins. But what would make our farmer become an adventurer? Well, we could say that the fruit trees were burned. They were burned down possibly like by a cult that stole all the farm hands, hands. All right, let's go into the scene. I looked upon the charred remains of my fruit grove. Trees that took generations to grow, crossbreed, and cultivate were gone in just 1 week. The moonlight was not enough light, so I let out a squeak, getting a better look at things with my echolocation. Everything seemed so blurry. Hot tears fell from my eyes and my throat seized up. I walked to the one remaining structure on the land, an old shed falling apart from disuse. I opened the door and let out another squeak. The sound bounced around the dusty room, eventually revealing the only rustless tool in the shed. It was my grandmother's enchanted scythe. I took it and started the trek to town and the blacksmith there. This scythe would be covered in blood by the time that I was done. And that's how he got his grandmother's scythe and turned it into the war scythe that we see today. After that, he found the cult that burned his fruit grove and killed his farm hands. Next scene. Blood was everywhere. The ring of chanting cultists went down like so much grass. It was hard to see them as people after what they had done. But that's fine. Probably better for me to see them as monsters anyway. I rifled through their pockets and took all the corn I found there. It's not much, but it's something. When I got to their leader, the one who leaped around as I cut down her allies, I noticed a mask that was different than the rest. It, like the others, was made from hands, but sounded different under my echolocation. It wasn't made of flesh. I poked at it. Metal. It rang as I tapped it. But more than that, I touched it and felt a charge. Something was in there. Some kind of magic? I held it to my face. A surge of power filled my body. I felt light, then heavy. Light, heavy. Light, heavy. And then I got control of myself and it felt normal. I nodded and grinned at this development. It seems that I found quite a useful tool. And now, finally, we have the gauntlet and armor. I unburdened myself of what I had done with the cults when I got to the town. They were grateful. Apparently, I was not the only one who had had their livelihood destroyed because of those beasts masquerading as people. The people who I talked to reported what happened to the governor, and the next day I was presented with 3 things. A bag of gold, heavy, and apparently a reward to my efforts. A letter of recommendation to an adventurers guild in the larger city half a day's walk from here. And a strange spiked gauntlet. Their blacksmith, the same one who made my scythe, gave me instructions to meet his friend in the city who could tailor it to fit, along with making some proper armor. I hope the city's reward can pay for it all. I suppose I'm an adventurer now. And there we have it. A backstory for this adventurer that marks a strong connection to the land he just came from, just from a few items. So now, let's pull out that creature card and start filling it in. First off will be the name. Maybe go for something to do with fruit bats, or fun fact, mega bats, which is the common classification of the family Pteropodidae. That can break down into Wingfoot. So let's name this adventurer Jonathan M. Wingfoot. And of course, M stands for Mega Bat, which will never be revealed to anybody. Next up are the abilities. These will help illustrate what Jonathan can do and how he uses his equipment. Let's start with the scythe. Its main enchantments are for durability and cutting, very useful to a typical farmer. But of course, now that it's a war scythe, those enchantments serve even better. So how do we name that kind of thing, that kind of relationship of conversion? Something war scythe. Actually, let's, instead of going for the conversion, let's go for the history. Grandma's Enchanted War Scythe. Yeah, that could be pretty cool. All right, next up, we'll go for the mask. Simply put, it manipulates Jonathan's weight alongside the weight of anything he holds or touches. It works kind of like a Kanohi mask for anyone who knows Bionicle. So let's name it as such. Great Mask of Weight Manipulation. Finally, there's the Gauntlet. I like the idea that it's mundane, but extremely well made. Maybe even with Mithril. On top of that, let's pull inspiration from one of my favorite daggers, the Sword Breaker. So we'll call this one Mithril Swordbreaker Gauntlet. And now we have the stats. We'll be using the D&D 5th edition stats spread, but the numbers will refer to the modifiers instead of the stats themselves. Strength. Gotta be decently strong to fight well with this sort of equipment. 2 points. Constitution. Bats aren't that well known for their toughness, but this one's a farmer. Corn-fed, and it's hard to not be toughened up there. 2. Dexterity. Here's where I believe Jonathan really specializes, despite being an overall generalist. 3. Intelligence. This farmer turned adventurer doesn't feel the need to know much beyond how to plant and cultivate an orchard of fruit trees. 1. Wisdom. I really like how bats use both sight and echolocation. It gives them 2 major ways to perceive the world, even if their eyes are much weaker. So let's give them a point for each way. 2. Charisma. Jonathan always found it hard to get invested in most people outside of his family. And now that his family is gone, he still doesn't find making new friends easy. -1. Finally, we have the core phrases. These are a set of statements or questions that help characterize monsters and guide DMs on how to play these creatures in a unique and interesting way. I suppose I'm an adventurer now. Jonathan had his path in the world ripped from him, and in his fight for revenge, he happened to live an adventurer's life for a few days. So the former farmer went with the flow and became an adventurer. Beasts can be anything. Even people. Having grown up on a farm, Jonathan lived with the cycle of life and death. He saw what animals can do, how evil they could be, and learned the detachment needed to kill another living being. The cultists taught him that this cycle applies to people too. Sometimes you need to kill your favorite pig to have dinner that night. People take care of people who help. Even when Jonathan wasn't seeking reward, the villagers who were plagued by the cult paid him and even set him up to start his life as an adventurer. They took care of him when he could have otherwise been lost, all because he helped, just a little. So, at the beginning of me writing this video, it was fairly simple. It just intended to show how interesting historical equipment could be and to demonstrate how that could work. Like those 3 rules from the beginning, using reference cards, historical weapons, and armor, applying a fantasy flair, set up a wonderful character with a rich backstory that grew far beyond what I expected. He was built completely off of a combination of historical weaponry and fantastical equipment. So I suppose my recommendation to y'all, look up historical weaponry, find something cool, and make a character who uses it. And even if you don't want to do that, you at least have one more NPC to use for your games. Please, let me know if you do. I'd love to hear stories of Jonathan M. Wingfoot in your games. So now, if that guy seems cool and y'all want to see more like him, open up the medieval manuscript of Like and turn to the page detailing the legend of Subscribe. I also have another video where a similar bat-like hero searches for his kidnapped brother. So link to that right now. And with that, let's bring this video to a close. For those of you with dark skies, good night. And if you have bright days, good morning. Whatever part of the world you're from, I hope you have a lovely morning, afternoon, evening, and night. Goodbye!